I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Dr. Bones, listening to Dr. Bones.
Good evening, this is Dr. Bones Live, and tonight my guest is Peter Cline. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, first off, how did you, let's put it this way, what would you classify yourself as? Because, I mean, you get so many different kinds of music, so you're not, are you classifying yourself as a DJ, or like, how do you classify, how you work?
Yeah, well, let's see. Let me be glib. Unclassifiable? No. So, songwriter, basically. And, you know, when I've got something I want to say, I find a good way to say it. So, I'm not too tied to a genre, I'm not too tied to a style, I'm not too tied to a process. So, you know, even when I'm doing instrumental music, without vocals, I'm trying to tell a story. So, I try and find the best ways to tell that story. And, you know, it might sound kind of abstract on the surface, especially the instrumental stuff, but it's definitely, there's a narrative line that runs through it.
All right, just curiosity, because the songs you sent me are very different in each way, so I wasn't sure if there was an actual classification to it, because there's not always, and it's just always more of a curiosity question to me. Now, how long have you been doing this? I mean, what kind of spearhead you into doing this type of music?
Well, you know, what you're hearing on the Peter Cline persona and the Candy Trash persona, about 3 to 4 years. But I actually came up through the Athens music scene, which was in the late 70s, early 80s, and the Atlanta music scene in the 90s. So I've actually been around for a while. And, you know, I'm compadres and friends with people like Pylon, Love Tractor, RuPaul, REM, B-52s, folks like that. So those are people I knew growing up. And friends of mine, people I went to their shows and danced to, and people I sat in rehearsal spaces with and things like that. So I've been doing it for quite a while, actually.
Okay, because, you know what, I was just about to ask you about that, just because when I saw, like, Survived Athens and Atlantic music scene, I was kind of curious as to what exactly that meant.
Yeah, well, a lot of survival is what you survived were late nights and hanging out in clubs and dancing a whole lot and hanging out with some really, really interesting, cool people who were, I guess the best way to describe those things, they were about being artists first, and music was the way you expressed who you were as an artist. And I don't know how strict the rules are here, but we had a saying in Athens, which was F art, let's dance. And that's kind of the way we looked at it. So, you know, we were into thinking about stuff, but we really just want to have a good time, too.
Well, right on. I mean, because it's just, this is kind of different for me. I haven't heard anything like this in a while, so when I started following on Twitter, it's like, well, this is kind of cool, because it gave me something different and something new to kind of throw into the mix. And it's always curious, it's always cool to kind of hear what the quote-unquote veterans now have done and have changed their music style over the years, and how they've kind of came upon where they're at right now as opposed to where they started.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's kind of cool about this, too, is a lot of people, what they listen to now, they don't realize there's a deep history to it. And that a lot of what they hear is the tip of the iceberg, and there are a lot of people who influence it and then kind of disappear, which is fine. You know, it's not like you're supposed to live forever musically or artistically. You have to reinvent yourself. So whatever you do, if it influences something, that's cool. Let it move on, and you should move on too. But I think a lot of people will listen to certain types of music and they don't think there's much of a history behind it. They think maybe it's 2, 3, 4 years deep. But no, it's been going on for 50 years, and that's cool.
Well, you know, that's right. You know, and it's, you know, that's one conversation that comes up a lot, at least among myself and some of my friends, is about music, how it kind of goes in circles, and, that it does change, but in this different variations, and it's always kind of interesting to kind of hear how we'll call it the new ages put their spin on it, because I mean music is constantly evolving, but just like anything else, you know, the old influences still kind of stick in there somewhere, and it's always interesting to me to see how they're we'll call say like reworked.
Yeah, well, you know, Marty Dow, who was the head guy behind Red Star Records, just died this week, and he was like in his 80s. He was interesting. He was the guy who broke Blondie back in the 70s, and a bunch of other influential groups, Television, and Suicide. And Suicide, for example, you know, I work primarily in a synth pop kind of mode right now. Suicide was the band that established the idea that you have a keyboard player, synthesizer player, and a singer out front, which of course led to Yazoo, Erasure, Pet Shop Boys, all this kind of stuff. But most people will listen to, you know, a synth pop band like, you know, Glass City or something and say, oh, okay, well, it's cool. They must have just made this up. But it's been going on for a long time. And people ring their own changes on it, which is exactly how it should be. Nothing should stay the same. Everything should kind of evolve and change over time.
Well, that's right, because I mean everything can become let's say stagnant after a while. And you know, although there are certain cool music time periods, it's nice that it has evolved, because I mean, you're right, it's just gonna get old after a while. You're gonna kind of get sick of the same old thing, which is essentially what's happening and has been for a number of years now on the radio, where all bands are sounding the same and everything's sounding the same. There's no real big massive change, and that's why so many people like myself have gone to the indie and unsigned and that sort of thing, because the music is so much better, because it's so much more fresh. You're not hearing the same loop, you know, or pop beat, what have you, over and over again. Because like I'll admittedly, like, I rarely, if ever, listen to the mainstream radio, just because like I can't stand to listen to it anymore.
Well, it's boring, and the reason it's boring is because what's happened is, instead of ideas, it's about craftsmanship on this kind of low level. Like, how do I use technology to make everything sound perfect? And interesting art is not about perfection. It's about how do you present imperfection in a way that catches people's imagination. So if I'm worried about using software to make everything in perfect time and the vocals have perfect pitch, and I want to, you know, use stems and all that kind of stuff and lock everything in,
Right.
whether it's guitar-based music or, you know, keyboard-based music or whatever, then, you know, you suck the soul out of it. So you've got people like Bruno Mars, who's a great craftsman and, you know, technically a fabulous singer and a pretty good songwriter, but the stuff has no life in it. And you listen to it and you're kind of like, okay, the first 2 or 3 times you're like, well, that's kind of cool. But it's not like the Shangri-Las or, you know, the Ronettes or something, which is like real lo-fi.
Right.
And has lots of garbage in the noise and noise in the system, but you go, oh, okay, there's like, you know, real people here doing stuff. And so, you know, pop music, the radio world as it is outside the internet and in certain places, is not about a DIY, a do-it-yourself culture. It's about how to present this false picture of perfection. And it's ultimately pretty sterile.
You know, that's a really good point. And the one thing I want to bring up on that note, like kind of different sounds of people actually doing things, and it was essentially kind of a pioneering change was Tommy Morell from Rage Against the Machine, with all his different sounds with his guitar only, and no like added effects, which is something like huge and new and just unreal that nobody had ever really done before.
Yeah, or you take someone like Anna Calvi, who also is a guitar player and singer, and she's not playing her guitar through a ton of effects, but she's playing her guitar like she really means it. And so you get this huge sense of who she is as an artist. And when you read about what she says about her process as a writer, it's very thoughtful. And she says, you know, I'm telling a story in every part of the song, from, you know, the chord progression to what I think about putting in the arrangement, all serves the song. But what mostly you hear on the radio, it serves this kind of pre-selected ear. What is it that people want to hear? Not what should they hear or what do I want them to hear, but what do they, you know, what is it they're going to accept? And that's boring.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, I'm going to eat the same thing for breakfast every morning because I know that oatmeal pleases me. And, you know, and that's great. So you eat the oatmeal and you're regular, and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of your life, you've eaten so many, tens of thousands of bowls of oatmeal, and you die.
Yeah.
And great. And if you go to heaven, I guess you get to eat something other than oatmeal. I don't know.
Well, no, you're right. I mean, the same routine does get boring, and it's one of those things. We'll say everything in moderation. We'll put it that way.
Yes.
All right, we're gonna take a quick little break here, and we're gonna listen to Silver Isotope Rain. All right.
Cool.
All right.
Great song.
This is Peter Cline, Silver Isotope Rain. All right, that was Silver Isotope Rain by Peter Cline. Excuse me. Now, this one in particular was the very first song I actually listened to that you sent me, and I was very intrigued by it, mainly because of the pretty much the main hook. It just really kind of captures the ear, and like it's one of those things like it just. Kind of curious as how it's put together, because I know there's obviously a lot of programs out there and there's just so much to work with. So we'll put it this way, what did you use for this one, or how did you kind of come about with this one, start creating and mixing your beats and loops?
Which one was this?
This was Silver Isotope Rain.
I'm sorry?
Silver Isotope Rain.
Well, there are no loops or anything. And this is one thing that's a little bit different about how I do music. I'm working totally in a hardware environment. So I'm using actual physical synths. And, any kind of looping or anything that you hear is actually, arpeggiation and stuff on the synth itself. So everything I'm doing is done track by track in real time and then dumped into a hard disk recorder and mixed down there. So I'm not using software.
Okay, well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've recently kind of got into this, we'll call it genre of music the past few years, so my ear's not completely fine-tuned to it yet, so if I'm asking these questions, I hate to say I'm asking out of ignorance, but I am because I don't know a whole lot about it. I mean, I've done some research, but that only takes me so far, so it's always better to hear what the actual artist has to say, because like I said, this is new to me, but I like learning about it. I mean, I always like learning about different types of music, so it works for me on a few levels here.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of stuff you hear is using software, and there's a whole vocabulary behind it and stuff. You'll hear people say, like, I worked on a stem, or I sent someone a stem, and it's like a little snippet of sound that they built up. There's some good things about it, and you can do similar things using, hardware synths that are set up as sequencers and things like that, where you build it up a bit at a time. To me, there's a certain sterility to it. Now, my brother, who's also a musician, who's in a band called Love Tractor out of Athens, is now primarily a keyboard player, and he actually builds stuff up that way, although he uses hardware synths to do it. So he'll build a section and tweak the section. Me, I like to conceptualize the whole piece, and depending on what it is, it'll start different ways, and then, essentially, I build and discard in real time. And so maybe 80% of the track that you hear, like Silver Isotope Rain, is pre-planned to a certain extent, and then the rest of it's essentially live improvisation over it. And the trick is, how do you keep the happy accidents in it, as opposed to trying to build everything down to a level where it's all perfectly quantifiable.
No, that makes perfect sense. As I've only ever done an interview, one other interview with somewhere along the lines of the type of music you're playing, not quite the same, but so it was pretty much my first one. So like I said, it's still a learning process for me, but I'm enjoying it and having a good time because like you're filling me in and kind of giving me more of I'll say a direct approach and more in-depth approach to like how the music's arranged, because it's nice to hear that it's in real time, because in my mind, it seems that it's a lot more work and a lot harder than we'll say working with software and kind of working the loops. I know that can be trying, but this seems much more intense work, and you're really putting like your own hard work into it.
Yeah, but I think both are valid approaches. I think the difference is that you have to work harder to get what you want. The way I do it, when you deal in soft synths and software, there are a lot of nice sounds out there, and you can just kind of pick and choose the sounds, but you can't affect them very much unless you're a real programmer. And so when you hear a lot of the sameness in electronica and electronic music, what you're hearing is people who work with pretty good software packages, but you get to the limitation of there aren't too many accidents with it. So if I'm working with a analog synth or a modeling synth, which is going to be a digital synth, but it's set up like an analog synth, I have a whole lot of control over my basic input, my basic signal, what it sounds like, and how it changes through a song. But the difference is I'm not going to be able to tweak it once it's done. I have to tweak it as I do it. If you're working in software, you get a million chances to change every bit of the signal path. And I don't have that. So I'm having to listen very closely as I'm doing something and listening to the parts I can hear and intuiting the parts that I can't hear. And so it's exciting. It's kind of a journey into the unknown to work that way.
And that's what I was talking about. That's where, in my mind, it becomes more intense because you're listening that much closer and the fact that you really only have the one chance, makes it that much more interesting and sounds that much more better as a finished product once you realize what kind of work actually has gone into the song. Because it's one of those things where you can listen to a song, and a lot of times you can tell, a lot of the hard work was put into it. And there's sometimes, the song sounds good, but you're just not sure. But when you hear how it really came about, like, wow, that wasn't what I expected, and so much more interesting now. Now the song's got that much more merit to it.
Yeah, yeah. And you can kind of tell when stuff is, one way people will say, oh, that song sounds kind of overproduced. And what I think they're saying is that they're like saying there doesn't seem to be a human element into it. There doesn't seem to be any kind of accident or response to an accident in it.
No, very good point. And the thing is, too, is nowadays, I mean, you remember the old kind of cliche, guitarists are a dime a dozen. Now there's like 1,000,001 DJs, right? So it's and it's just a question of trying to find the ones that actually stand out, that, like you said, aren't like overproduced, aren't kind of just regurgitating, past stuff and just playing a little bit tweak on and saying, hey, this is brand new, when it's really, it's 20 years old, but still sounds as bad as it did 20 years ago.
Yeah, because they're not dependent on software. They're not saying, oh, here's this, sound that I bought. Let me take these bought sounds and put something together. They're taking, ideas and saying, what sound embodies the idea that I'm interested in. And it's a very different approach when you stop and think about it.
Now, when you're writing a song, creating, I know you don't necessarily set yourself a timeline, like nobody really does, but are there some songs that take just a little bit longer than others, or are they kind of around the same period of time, just because you have all that stuff going into it all the time, trying to kind of figure it out and making sure you kind of get through it the first time and not having to redo the entire thing over again?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's different for every song. I mean, when you sit down and actually record is only a part of the process. And so, when I write a song, I may think about the song and its different elements for quite a while. I may have a title that intrigues me, like there's a song I sent you called Frozen Venice,
Right.
which is a vocal piece. And, a friend of mine on Twitter gave me the title Frozen Venice, and just in a conversation, I thought, oh, I like that. That phrase. What does that phrase mean? And so I spent several weeks going, what does Frozen Venice mean? What are the pictures that go with it? What are the sounds that go with it? What is the story? And if I'm going to tell the story, how does the story sound? And then what does it mean? Is it just a random story, or is there some kind of purpose behind it? So that process can take anywhere from, 2 days to 2 years. And then when you actually sit down to record something, that's usually the quickest part, actually. That's just saying, I've got the idea. I know what I want to express. Are the pieces doing it? And if not, why? And then once you've recorded the song, there's also, something I've gotten more and more interested in is, how do I refine the sound in post-production? How do I handle the mix of it? How do I handle the master of it? So that the elements come out in the proper proportions.
Now, do you find putting imagery to like the name, like you say, like Frozen Venice, do you find that kind of helps out a lot, of being able to kind of picture what it means to you, or what it means in your mind?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say, music is a very imagistic process, whether it's using like language in the sense of words, or language in the sense of pictures or sounds. They all kind of meld together. You're definitely creating something that, although it's built out of sound, it has a three-dimensional quality. You want to be able to walk around it. You want to be able to touch it. And so, if a song is going to work for me in the sense of getting as far as recording it, it's going to have a lot of dimensions to it. Otherwise, I can't figure out how to put it down. I can't take a random sound and say, oh, now I'm going to build something around that random sound. It doesn't work with me. The idea has to come first. The image has to come first.
Now, how do you find, how does this carry over to a live sound? I mean, have you played this stuff live, and
No, I haven't. me ask you. It's like I've been increasingly asking myself that question because a logical next step is to take, one of these two general streams of what I do and figure out how to, if not reproduce it exactly live, how do I take the same kind of thing and convey it live? And I'm wrestling with that right now. It's been on my mind a lot the last 10 days, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, I can't imagine it would be an easy thing because, even with the technology, things like that can still prove to be very difficult. And obviously, as we know, there's a lot of bands who have recorded studio albums and haven't taken them on the road just because, they don't have all the stuff they have in the studio to kind of take it out and make it sound decent enough. There was one band in particular that I saw live, and some of the songs they played live and how it carried out on stage was really well done. I'm just surprised was I saw a Radiohead a number of years ago, and there was a few of their songs that I was sure that would only remain in studio and never live, and they carried over live, and it sounded amazing.
Yeah, and there are two schools of thought about live performance too. Do you try and do everything exactly as you've recorded it, which is the prevalent one, I think, or do you say, okay, well, that was what happened in the studio, and now let's try to do a similar thing but different for the live environment? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it depends on a lot of things. Peter Murphy, who was the singer in Bauhaus for donkey's years, has done a lot of solo work. And he's toured a lot recently, and he had the Mr. Moonlight tour, which concluded about a year ago. And essentially what he did was Bauhaus songs, which are, the progenitors of the goth metal kind of sound. And he did them with acoustic guitar and violin, and it was very successful. And you recognize them as Bauhaus songs, and you recognized it as Peter Murphy doing Bauhaus songs, but they were very different animals than what had been recorded in the studio or what had been done with the band Bauhaus. And I think that's very successful. Then on the other hand, you've got a band that periodically reforms like Roxy Music, Brian Ferry's band, and they're renowned for creating very faithfully exactly what they did in the studio on stage, and that also works very well.
Well,
so there's not one answer to the question.
No, and that's a good point because I've talked about this with other bands before. Playing the songs live gives you a chance to kind of throw those add-ons or switch up a little bit, and just all matter, I guess, of how the band presents it because not everybody's gonna like everything, but you want it to fly for the majority because you're not just doing this for yourself, but you're doing it for the fans as well. So you want to make sure you kind of got that almost we'll say even balance between the two.
Yeah, and every band is different, and their fans' expectations are different as well. But I also think that as an artist, you want to say, okay, when I look at what I do, I'm thinking I ask myself the technical question. I can get two directions. I could essentially, record or MIDI everything and stand there and pretend to play a part. Or I could actually bring other musicians in and say, okay, well, here are the rough parts, let's rehearse and see how they come together. The latter would be much more interesting to me, to see what other people did as musicians with the parts that I've written and what they might change or add, or the subtleties, like if I do, say, a part that I would do on an acoustic violin as opposed to doing on a solo keyboard. How is that gonna be different when a violinist handles it in a live situation? And to me, that's an interesting question.
No, very good point indeed. Because and that's the thing is otherwise, obviously, other bands, excuse me, have taken I've put bands together for just for the tour, or they've brought in different guests on with different instruments. And for the most part, it's worked out. And for the most part, it's worked out. I'm not going to get too far into that because I can think of one band in particular that I'm not a huge fan of that took an orchestra with him, and I thought it was just kind of a cheesy kind of cop out. Just because they're one of those bands that, in my mind, they think we've been doing this for so many years, we can do anything, and it's oh, you keep telling yourself that. I didn't think so, but so.
Yeah.
But who am I to say I'm not the one making the millions and millions of dollars and have the legions of fans too, right? So always.
Yeah. And so, if you're a certain type of artist operating at a certain level with certain types of fans, you've got to meet their expectations. And, it lends itself over time to grandiosity. So, you take a band that was pretty interesting at one point, like U2, and is massively uninteresting now because everything has to be gigantic. And or a band like Coldplay is a more recent example, where everything is just kind of like, overblown, and the ideas are kind of lost inside that. And yet, both bands share in common that, they're good songwriters, and they have some pretty interesting things to say.
No, you're right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but they get to a certain point where they have to, answer the expectations of fans for more of the same, as opposed to saying, well, our job is actually to surprise our fans and to, kind of do things that they wouldn't expect us to do. But, that's where you get into the whole business end of music. And, you become an investment. Unfortunately, I will probably never be anyone's investment. And that's sad because I would like the money.
Yeah.
And the freedom to write music all the time. But it's good because then I get to be honest about what I do. And, there are a handful of people out there whose opinions matter to me. And, I primarily write music for myself first.
Right.
And then my check on what I'm writing, whether I'm being honest, is am I getting, a range of reactions and, opinions about the music that kind of back up what I intended to do. But I'm not pleasing a label. I'm not filling a venue. I'm not doing those anything. So to go back to the original question about playing live, it's a complicated question because it's not just me getting up there with, a 12-string guitar, which I tend to play in any event, and, in a room full of people drinking beer and tea.
Right.
It requires, thought and preparation. And so to realize what I like to do in the studio live is not just me and not just a commercial transaction with an audience. It's me and an artistic idea and people who I hope would appreciate that. And then how do I give it to them in a way that's different than if they're sitting there with earbuds in or earphones on or playing a CD or by themselves in a room? How do I do it in a way that creates a sort of communal musical space in that moment that allows me to be me and allows them to be them? So it's an interesting question.
Oh, that was very well put, Peter. That's very, very, very in depth and very enlightening too. A lot of points I never even thought of. Just to jump back for 2 seconds here, I'm not only going to take a minute on this. As far as talking about U2 and Coldplay, I couldn't agree more. Kind of a useless random fact. U2 did say that Zooropa almost killed their career completely. So they're, I know they've been doing well, but everything's big, and their stages are just massively huge. So they jump back from that, but one album like that can just almost finish you off. And I guess for their sake, I'm like, obviously they're happy it didn't, but yeah, they lost me. Yeah, they lost me at that one. I was done. Like Octoon Baby was the last one I ever bought. And to jump over to Coldplay real quick, Chris Martin, you're right, is a great songwriter. And to go from Yellow, A Rush of Blood to the Head, then X and Y. X and Y was really good. I actually really enjoyed that one. But then Viva La Vida and stuff like that, I was like, now it's getting like a little too commercial, a little not necessarily forced, but it's kind of hitting that kind of repetitive stuff. It's like, I'm hoping you guys.
I remember the video for Yellow, and I remember saying it's Chris Martin walking down a rainy beach, and he's a scrawny kind of like 19 or 20-year-old, and I remember thinking, this is kind of a quirky kind of song, and it was, and kind of a quirky artist. But the quirkiness disappeared very quickly. And I don't think it's that Chris Martin is any less quirky. I think it's, the pressures of, what Coldplay became moved away from saying, okay, well, you can be quirky or you can do this. And it's like the communal wisdom is like, well, quirky is fine, but let's do this because we know it's going to get a certain idea of we're going to change the world. And I remember seeing them years ago and being in a venue in Atlanta before they were well known at all. It was right after the release of Boy, and there were 30 people in the audience.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, and now you think, you know, would they play for 30 people? You know, you would have to kill people to get it down to that number.
Well, yeah, no kidding.
Even though they're kind of masked and not chic anymore, but still, you know, they draw people.
Oh no, that's a really good point. I've personally never seen them, but I mean, I have all the albums. Like I have October and I have Under a Blood Red Sky. So the Joshua Trio, obviously, which is the classic, and so. But some of the new ones, like I said, I pretty much stopped at Octane Baby. After that, you know, I kind of heard the songs on the radio, but didn't really go out and buy the album or kind of waste too much time going to seek them out. So, but like I said, at Zeropa, they had me. They lost me. It's like, all right, done. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you know, they outlived their ideas. Is I guess the best way to put it.
Right, and with even though Bono's done a lot of guitar work, yada yada yada, that's kind of getting a little old too. So, kind of
yeah. When stuff doesn't change, when it doesn't evolve, it gets old.
That's absolutely right. So let's take another quick break here, and because this is the one you sent me the other week, and this is probably I think my favorite one you sent me. This one's called "A Burning House."
where the stones are made. Incessant.
All right, Burning House, Peter Cline. Now this was a little bit differently arranged. What was the thought process behind this one? Like, what was your idea behind the whole thing? Because it's a very interesting song.
Well, you know, the lyric part of it is actually pretty old. It's stuff I've reworked off and on about 5 or 6 times because the images appeal to me a whole lot. And what's happened over time is the imagery has gotten more simple. An earlier version of the song, you know, had all kinds of interesting stuff in it. And the more stuff you put in the song, the harder it is for people to focus on anything. So when I came upon this iteration of the song, I had the lyric in mind. The first thing I thought of was, let me work on the bass line. And we were talking earlier about Bauhaus,
Right.
as a matter of fact. And I actually written most of the song, recorded most of it, before I realized that I'd done my own kind of version of, you know, seminal Bauhaus work, Bela Lugosi's Undead, in my own way, which means taking a strong syncopated drum track with a lot of echo on it and getting a basic, very basic kind of melodic theme that threads through, and then putting the vocals on top of that. And it's actually a strange song for me to sing because I didn't like my vocals at all. Not because I didn't like it technically, but because I would listen and you're like, oh, who is that sick fucker
Yeah.
singing this stuff?
I know you mean.
And,
I sound so.
you know, what's wrong with them? But then as I listened, I thought, like, the fact that I'm like sitting outside of this so much, going like, who is that?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I've kind of accomplished what I wanted. And I'm sitting there like, oh, there's Peter singing, you know, about a burning house and all this stuff. Who is that guy? Who's the character in the song? Who's the narrator, as it were? And so it was pleasing on that level. It was a little bit different than a lot of stuff I'd done before. I've been trying to write some more synth poppy type vocal stuff. And, you know, so I was kind of judging it through that lens, thinking like, well, it doesn't sound very poppy and stuff. And then I went, okay, I'm fine with that. I'm fine.
Well, right on. You know what? I have one more question to finish this up with you, Peter. And since we're using a form of it, talked about a little bit. Excuse me. How do you find the social media's work for you? Since you're kind of a vet in music, you know, kind of gone through a little bit before. You know, like things like Twitter, SoundCloud, Facebook have become like very huge.
Yeah, no, I think the social media is great, particularly for musicians, because it allows people to be heard and, even more importantly, to connect both with other musicians and with people who like your music. You know, you don't have the middleman of the big business around you, and that's nice. It gives an immediacy to stuff. You get feedback. You know, you get to find people who are genuinely interested in what you do and connect with people who share similar values. So those are absolutely great parts of it. I think the big question about, you know, social media and web-based stuff for musicians now is, how do you monetize stuff? You know, how do you make a living or come close to making a living as a musician? It's changed. It used to be that you sold product,
Right.
and you made money. That's gone. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, performing live. That's essentially how people, you know, make a living as musicians now.
Absolutely.
And so the social media allows you to reach out to people to figure out who your audience is. Amanda Palmer of Dresden Dolls is a fascinating person to listen to about this, and she has a TED Talk, if you Google it, it's on YouTube, where she talks about the relationship between giving and receiving as an artist in the internet age. And it's definitely worth listening to because she's got a very, very clear sense of how this works. And it's different because a lot of the people I actually meet online, and they're people who are much younger than me, think that somehow they're going to leverage their online presence in some form of, you know, the old style record
Right.
And somebody's going to come in and swoop them up, and
Right.
here we're going to put you in a studio for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And give you
Sorry, Peter. We got a few seconds here left. All right.
money on promoting you.
So.